The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. I've received a lot of requests for a teen-friendly version of the Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter, and so, as a holiday gift to my listeners, I've re-recorded the updated version of the story, and will be releasing it in the month of December. Much of the story remains the same, with a handful of scenes receiving a few funny changes. Please be aware that while the story isn't explicit, it does have language that's not meant for very young children. I will resume regular episodes with new content in January. Chapter 4. Teasing and Trolling. Once on the train, Hermione walked past several compartments before finding one empty. She was a long-time loner and knew the routine. Don't try and sit with others and let them reject you. Reject them first. She'd settled herself into the bench for only a moment when the door was thrown open with a clatter. "There you are! Merlin, Draco, how are we supposed to keep an eye on her when she's hiding down here at the end of the train?" "Shut up, Theo." Draco and one of the other boys from the reception at Malfoy Manor, a chestnut brown-haired boy with lively eyes, stepped into the compartment. "Hermione, we would be pleased if you were to join us in our car," Draco said stiffly, as though delivering lines in a play that he didn't want a part in. Ordinarily, she wouldn't feel right accepting a pity invite, but her mother's words came back to her. "Take time to get to know your classmates." She took a chance and answered, "Oh, well, if you're sure." She followed them in silence, noticing how Theo kept elbowing Draco in the ribs, as though they were both in on a private joke. Draco, however, didn't seem to want to play along. "Through here," he said gruffly, gesturing her through the compartment door about halfway down the train. The train ride had been quiet. No one spoke much, even when the woman pushing the snack trolley stopped by. Hermione watched with interest as the others made purchases, then selected a chocolate frog, paying with the unusual coins she'd gotten at Gringotts Bank. She managed to capture the frog before it hopped away, but the fact that it hopped quite took away her appetite for it. "Who did you get?" Theo asked. "Pardon?" "Never heard of him." Theo stuffed 2 frogs into his own mouth. "I got Merlin and Bagshot." "Boring. Let me see." He held out his hand, and not knowing what else to do, Hermione put her hand in his. "I want your card, Granger," Theo said, smirking. "Save the hand-holding for when we're alone." Hermione stared blankly at him until he reached for the chocolate frog wrapper and removed the card inside. "It says Ravenclaw. Worthless. Here you go." And he gave it back to her. "Rowena Ravenclaw. I've read about her. Wit and wisdom, isn't it?" "Yeah, the know-it-alls," Theo offered, licking the chocolate from his thumb and forefinger. "Probably where I'll end up," she thought. "And where do you suppose you'll be? Which house?" she asked Theo, and by extension, Draco next to him. Both of them looked at her with incredulity, but Draco was the first to recover. "Our parents were all in Slytherin. It's most likely where they'll put us." "Oh," was all Hermione could manage. She'd read a bit about Salazar Slytherin and knew his stance on Muggleborns, though she supposed that it had been 1,000 or so years since his time, so evidently modern Slytherins were a little more accepting. "Yeah," said Theo with a lazy grin, as though he could sense her discomfort. Hermione stood between a girl who introduced herself as Daphne and a heavyset boy whose name she didn't recall from the Malfoy reception. He hadn't spoken that night, and he didn't speak now. They went in alphabetical order, so she was forced to wait. Her fingers were full of pins and needles, and her breath came much too fast with nerves. Finally, it was her turn. Professor McGonagall settled the hat upon her head, and to her surprise, a vague muttering could be heard inside of it. Lots of brains. More by far than most. Wisdom, too, though not as much as one might hope." Well, that hurt," she thought. "Cunning. Loyalty, it's all here." And a fair bit of courage. Better be Gryffindor, the hat yelled, and the students with red neckties to one side of the room cheered loudly. She stood, returning the hat to Professor McGonagall, and hurried that way without a backwards glance at the stunned Draco Malfoy. "What do you mean? The hat put her in Gryffindor?" Lucius was equally as stunned as his son had been. After meeting Hermione and spending time with Richard Granger, Lucius had no doubt that he was dealing with a diabolical duo. How had this young girl, this mudblood, managed to fool a magical artifact of a Hogwarts founder? "I've no idea. It took quite a while deciding, even longer than it took with Potter." "It took a long time for Potter as well." Lucius appeared to be mulling this over. "You know, there is talk that he will rise as another in place of the Dark Lord. To manage to kill or even heavily injure such a powerful wizard as the Dark Lord. He seems to have become friends with the Weasley boy." At this, Lucius's mouth drew into a thin line. "Keep watch, Draco. Everyone expected Potter to go into Gryffindor. Perhaps she knew it as well. She and her father may be planning something. Perhaps she intends to get close to Potter to take him out." "You think Hermione might want to kill Potter?" "These are strange days. Rule nothing out. If the opportunity arises, and you can be seen as assisting her, it might curry favour in the eyes of the Dark Lord, or anyone else who might seek to take his place." It had not been an easy couple of months for Hermione. Fitting in at wizard school proved to be nearly as difficult as fitting in at regular school, only this time with the added insult of roommates and no private bathrooms. Mere days into term, she found herself pulled into an argument between a housemate and Draco Malfoy. Well, all right. She'd inserted herself into it by insisting that the two Gryffindor boys not follow through with Draco's challenge of a duel. She knew he wasn't serious. Everyone but the boy Ronald knew. But boys could be so ignorant sometimes. But it was only through her quick thinking that her housemates escaped and had not lost house points. Draco had stopped her the next day on the way into Transfiguration's class. He stiffly apologized for his part in almost getting her into trouble, saying that he hadn't realized she was with them. "Just make sure it doesn't happen again, all right? And I wasn't with them. I was trying to tell them what a horrible idea it was to leave the common room after curfew," she explained. Draco seemed mollified. On Halloween, Charm's class had been especially rough. It was bad enough to see the exchange of amused glances between her classmates, but now to be teased and laughed at by members of her own house. It was all just getting to be too much. She wanted to leave. She wanted to go home. She wanted to take a shower without having to walk down a cold castle corridor afterwards. Then Ronald Weasley had the gall to make fun of her for not having any friends. It was all she could do to make it to the girls' toilet before she broke down into tears. "Should I try to find her? It's odd, isn't it? Her not being here for the feast," Draco worried. "Maybe Muggles don't celebrate Halloween," Goyle offered around a large mouthful of roast. "Maybe." But when Quirrell burst into the door, announcing a troll in the dungeons, there was nothing for it. He had to do something. If she was injured or killed by a troll, he was certain there would be retribution. He had no idea what Richard Granger would do to him and his family. The Slytherin prefect Sebastian McNair was leading them back down to the common room in the dungeons when Draco spotted them. Potter and Weasley were sneaking around down there as well. Had they been the ones to let the troll in? Draco broke away from the group, whispering to Theo to cover for him. He crept down the hall, passing the door of the girls' toilet just in time to hear a voice call, "Is someone out there?" It was Hermione. Bolstering his strength, he went inside. She was in the first stall, seated on the closed toilet. "You're right. There's a troll loose down here. I thought I'd just check on you," he explained. Being in here was nerve-wracking. Dying by troll attack in a girls' loo might go down as the worst way for an 11-year-old boy to pop his clogs. A troll? Yeah, you know. Great big smelly what? Just then, the door into the corridor slammed open with a giant crash. What the hell was that? He asked, though the question was mostly rhetorical. The smell that preceded the actual troll was answer enough. Bloody hell, it's in here! What? Hermione was panicked, frozen in fear. Stay in here! Draco yelled with much more bravado than he felt. Backing out of the stall, he gripped his wand tightly, the only weapon he had against the tall, muscled beast. He had nothing in his arsenal for this scenario. Come to think of it, he wasn't even sure he had an arsenal. Behind the troll, the door burst open once more. Potter and Weasley rushed into the room. "Malfoy, what are you doing in here?" Weasley shouted. His loud voice echoed off the tile walls and floor, and the troll, which before had looked confused, now seemed to grow agitated at the loud cacophony of noise. Draco ignored this inane question. "Did you use a rope or something to control this thing?" At their blank looks, Draco looked wildly around the room. The troll was growing rabid as their voices reverberated. He dropped his club, narrowly missing Draco, who dove out of the way, behind a waste bin. The bin fell on its side and rolled towards the troll. All 4 students watched with morbid fascination as the heavy metal bin clattered, banged, and tumbled towards the daft troll, rolling over his toes and banging into his shins. The huge beast let out a wail that made all of them cover their ears as it bounced off the walls. Then the troll was tumbling, falling gracelessly forward. Draco flattened himself against the wall as the troll came, feeling the whoosh of air as it fell with a great crash, directly in front of him. Hermione leaped from her hiding spot in the stall, brandishing her wand. "Wingardium Leviosa!" The troll's own wooden club rose into the air, hovering over the shrunken head of the beast. Hermione made a slashing motion with her wand, and the club slammed downwards forcefully. The troll was knocked senseless. Draco looked up at her swiftly. The look of satisfaction, of triumph. It was breathtakingly scary. Or possibly just breathtaking. It both confused and excited him. The door banged open a 3rd time. "What is the meaning of this?" Professor McGonagall's sharp Scottish brogue echoed around them angrily. Draco began, but Hermione cut in. "Professor, I was in the toilets when Draco Malfoy came to warn me about the troll. He fought it off, ma'am." Professor McGonagall looked around the room, taking in Hermione and Draco with their wands drawn, and Potter and Weasley still standing near the door, dumbstruck at what had happened, wands still stowed away. "I see. And you two thought you would just come and enjoy the show?" Her acerbic tone cut through the befuddlement. "No, Professor, we were coming to warn Hermione as well." "Interesting, gentlemen. Mr. Malfoy, how did you know Miss Granger was in here?" "I didn't. I heard her asking through the door who was there, and I thought she should know there's a troll on the loose," Draco offered. "And you, Potter? Weasley?" Weasley began.
"Well, Ron—"
Potter started, but drew back when he saw Ron's sharp look. He tried again. "Some people were teasing Hermione in class. We heard she might be hiding down here, and we were coming to warn her as well."
"I see,"
the staunch witch answered shrewdly, eyeballing Weasley.
"Well, Mr. Malfoy, 100 points to Slytherin for your brave actions."
"Professor, Hermione was the one who actually knocked the troll out," Draco said charitably.
"Then 100 points to Gryffindor as well. But I'll have 25 points each from Potter and Weasley for not following directions."
She turned to the 2 sputtering Gryffindors.
"You were supposed to follow Percy Weasley back to Gryffindor, and you did not."
"But, Professor, we knew Hermione was trapped down here with the troll."
"And she was trapped down here because of your bullying actions, Mr. Weasley. It is because of you that she was here at all, and that is why I am docking you points,"
McGonagall said grimly. The 2 boys were quiet. As the 4 of them left Professor McGonagall to the task of securing the troll, Potter and Weasley trudged up the stairs ahead of them.
"This is my common room," Draco said, stopping outside of the hidden door to the Slytherin lair. "Thank you for your help with the troll." She lifted an eyebrow at him. "Thanks for coming to warn me." Her arms darted around him quickly, capturing him in a brief hug before she let go. Her eyes downcast, she hurried upstairs after her housemates. That was unexpected. On the one hand, he was now indebted to Hermione Granger, not just for saving his life, but for getting him out of trouble. On the other hand, he found he didn't mind it too terribly much, which was a bit frightening. Someone who did mind a lot that he owed a life debt to Hermione Granger was Lucius. "For Salazar's sake, Draco! You're supposed to be protecting her! If this girl had been killed, that man might have torn us all to pieces in our sleep, ripped our throats out in the night. You heard what he said about the neck-decorating contest."
"Yes, Father, but don't you think perhaps he was—"
"Draco, no one is asking you to think. Just keep this girl alive and safe."
The following morning, a note was delivered to the kitchen window of Heathgate 16, tied to the leg of the owl Colwyn, who looked far more contrite than usual.
"News from Hermione?"
Linda asked, buttering a slice of toast.
"Not from her, but it is about her. Lucius says she and Draco encountered a troll, but they're all right. One of the professors captured and disposed of it," Richard said with amusement as he dipped his last mushroom in his egg yolk. "Trolls? Like the tiny little fellows that live under bridges and get outsmarted by goats?"
Linda asked with a small laugh.
"I suppose so. Hey, I ought to write back to Lucius, tell him he needs to get his school under control. Get it? Under control?"
Before he could stop himself, Richard dashed off a quick note with his joke, giving it back to Colwyn, who clamped it in his beak, and took off quickly out the open window. Linda cleared her dishes whilst Richard finished eating.
He asked, "Hey, how do you suppose a troll got into Hogwarts?"
"I don't know," she answered uncertainly.
"I'll bet he took the trolley."
Linda worked hard to keep her lips from smiling.
"Is that the last one?"
He nodded.
"Good.
Finish your tea. We're going to be late for work." Chapter 5. Diary and Deception. Hermione had enjoyed her first year at Hogwarts, but she was glad to return home at the end of June for a bit of normalcy, and a loo that she didn't share with 25 other girls. As the remainder of her first year at Hogwarts passed, she found friendships more easily. The girls in her dorm were nice, as were most of the boys, though that Ron Weasley was still a bit of a prat. It helped that Harry had apologized to her the day after the troll encounter, at least. In a surprise to some, it seemed, the Slytherins were all exceedingly nice to her. It wasn't unusual for her to partner with one of them for an assignment in class. Many evenings she sat with Draco and Theo to study in the library. Hermione thought nothing of it, even when others remarked on how strange it seemed for purebloods to take an interest in a Muggleborn. Neville from Gryffindor seemed to find it especially odd, whilst her friend Padma in Ravenclaw just found it funny. But Hermione chalked it up to her parents getting along so well with Draco's parents. Apparently the four of them were in regular correspondence, according to Richard and Linda. The year had ended quite eventfully for her housemate, Harry Potter. Apparently he and his friend Ron had gotten into a spot of bother on the third-floor corridor that Professor Dumbledore had warned them all away from at the start of the year. This didn't surprise Hermione. Harry seemed like the kind of boy that trouble followed. That summer, the Grangers came to dinner at Malfoy Manor in mid-July. Narcissa was pleased that they seemed suitably impressed with the china, crystal, and silver. Draco was happy to play wizard's chess with Hermione in the conservatory after dinner. Lucius was simply focused on keeping Richard happy and content. When a painting whispered the word mudblood as they passed, he incendiated it on the spot. When Richard commented that the soup was a bit salty for his taste, Lucius sent a death glare at the elf that delivered it. He raised an eyebrow towards the offending elf that silently said,
Go find an iron to press your ears."
And once the two men were cloistered in Lucius's study, when Richard found something that seemed out of place and unnecessary, Lucius immediately banished it to the pile of things that he'd been meaning to donate to the vintage vault in Diagon Alley. Richard was running his finger along the spines of the shelved books. Such interesting titles, he thought. Then he came upon a blank spine. Pulling it out to investigate, Lucius seemed oddly on edge, but said nothing.
"Huh, this is odd. Why would you keep an old, empty school journal?"
Lucius studied him carefully.
"Do you feel that I should not keep this?" Geez, who am I to say? I was just reading an article the other day, though, that talked about paring down, getting rid of the old, embracing the new. It just got me thinking, got me in that mindset, I mean—"
And at these words, Richard plucked the book from the table where he'd laid it, flipping it open.
"Look, this was purchased at Winstanley's on Vauxhall. I'm pretty sure that place closed down when I was a youngster. Is it sentimental?"
Lucius met Richard's gaze, trying to discern the meaning hidden there. Lord Voldemort had given this book to Lucius, had told him to keep it safe, and yet this man, this right hand of the Dark Lord himself, was telling him to get rid of it. Perhaps Richard knew something that Lucius did not. Was there a raid afoot? Did the Dark Lord no longer require it?
"I understand. I'll take care of it."
Lucius vanished the book, and it reappeared in a box in his wardrobe upstairs. He would take the box first thing in the morning to the vintage vault in Diagon.
"Okay, then,"
Richard agreed affably. School started up once more, and Hermione was excited to begin the year surrounded by friends, for the first time in her life. Her classes were going well. Her friend Draco was playing on the Slytherin Quidditch team, which meant that they could engage in a fun rivalry, although Hermione had little interest in sports. Their new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher was a dishy bloke who looked like a young Robert Redford. Even Ronald Weasley was acting friendlier and less Pratt-like. In any case, Ron's younger sister seemed quite nice, and the Halloween feast was one of the best yet. To a fatalist such as herself, it was little surprise, therefore, when everything seemed to crash down after the Halloween feast, just as it had the year before. Hermione, Lavender, and Parvati were returning to the Gryffindor common room after the Halloween feast, when they came upon a commotion on the second floor. Up ahead, an animal, a cat, was hung on a post, and there was writing on the wall, in blood. "Enemies of the air, beware! What does that mean?" she asked fearfully to no one in particular.
"Nothing good,"
said Seamus Finnegan, standing nearby. It had been a long few months for Draco. Ever since the Halloween feast he'd felt honour-bound to protect Hermione Granger, as she was most certainly one of the enemies of the heir of Slytherin that the wall had mentioned. The trouble was, she did not seem to appreciate this protection. In class, she acted much the same, although she seemed as curious about this Chamber of Secrets business as anyone else. Outside of the classroom, though, there were times when he felt she was trying to avoid him. If he came to sit near her in the library, she would scurry off, making excuses about meeting a friend in her common room. If they met in the courtyard outside, she seemed on edge. If he happened to catch her eye across the great hall, she looked away quickly. He took to following her whenever he was able. Already other students had been petrified by this beast in the chamber. His family couldn't take the chance of her becoming one of them. And he couldn't help but notice that she was spending more and more time in the company of Harry Potter. If he had his doubts before about Potter being some remade version of the Dark Lord, that doubt was dispelled when the dark-haired wizard spoke bloody parcel-tongue to the snake Draco had conjured during dueling practice. Hermione was getting close to the enemy, and she didn't even know it. Draco was acting really weird. They had started the year off normally enough, friends just as they were before, but this chamber business seemed to have changed him. Suddenly, he was nervous. He developed bags under his eyes as though he wasn't sleeping well. He seemed distracted and perhaps a bit obsessive. She found him lurking outside of the Gryffindor common room and the library. Any time she looked up towards his table in the great hall, he was already looking at her. She wasn't sure what to make of it. The problem was her housemate, Harry Potter, thought he might be behind this whole chamber business. He had come to her one night in the common room, told her what he'd heard in the corridors. Strange voices saying strange things. And then the other Muggleborns were attacked. Draco was one of her first friends, both in the wizarding and in the Muggle world. It was difficult, knowing that he was in Slytherin House, when it was Salazar Slytherin's beast causing all of these bloody problems. But it was not hard to believe that he could be playing a part in it. After all, even as a second year, he was a clear leader in Slytherin House. Awarded the position of Seeker on the Quidditch team. Near the top of the class, along with Hermione. He was on a clear trajectory to prefect and head boy. Was it so ridiculous to believe that he might be the heir of Slytherin? Well, she'd done it. She'd gone and fucking gotten herself petrified, and his father was going to go batshit crazy at the news. Lucius did not disappoint. "Salazar, sack Draco! How could you let this happen? You had one job this year." Lucius's angry face seemed to surge through the fire at him during their flu call that night. Draco considered telling his father that, in fact, he had several jobs. Obtaining good grades, winning Quidditch games, ingratiating himself with his professors and peers. None of these should have included following a swotty Muggleborn who didn't seem to want him around. "Well, one thing is for certain. We cannot allow the Grangers to find out about this." "You don't think the school will tell them?" "I'm on the board of governors. We have a gag order in place concerning this whole business. No word will get in or out about it." Lucius's eyes flashed up at Draco. "You have one very important thing to do. When the girl is revived, you must convince her not to tell her parents." "She's lying in a hospital bed, petrified like a statue. It's going to be weeks before this mandrake stuff is ready. You don't think it will come up in conversation that she spent multiple weeks in a hospital bed?" You might be right. I wonder if we could consider obliviation of the entire school. Someone will eventually mention it to her, even if you obliviate her. You don't think someone will say, "Hey, remember that time that you were petrified for several weeks in second year?" Lucius pursed his lips. "Fine. You're right, of course. But that just means you'll have to work very hard to convince her not to say anything. If Granger finds out that the future of the movement—" "Do you really think she's the future of the movement, Father? You yourself always referred to Muggleborns as mudblood—" "Do not use that word, particularly around her. I understand in the past we have allowed our language to wallow in the muck, one might say. We must elevate our way of thinking. These Muggles were chosen for a reason. They have something. Knowledge. A power. They know things. I told you about the raid, didn't I?" Yes, I know. He told you to get rid of that book, and the Minister of Magic raided the manor a few weeks later. Draco looked hard at his father. "You don't think that was just a coincidence?" "The Dark Lord does not put stock in coincidences, Draco, nor do I. So if Richard Granger tells me to do something, I will do it. Remember last year when he threatened my position on the Board of Governors of Hogwarts?" Draco sighed. "Yes, of course. Get your school under control. I understand. I'll impress upon her the need for secrecy." The Mandrake restorative draft had worked its magic, and Hermione and the other Muggleborns were back to normal. The middle of the night feast stretched into the wee hours, but Draco wasn't able to get a moment to talk with Hermione whilst they were still at Hogwarts. He found her at the train back to London, stopping by her compartment that she shared with several Gryffindors. "Hermione, do you have a moment?" Once in the corridor, They walked to the luggage storage area, settling atop a stack of trunks. I just wanted to check on you, make sure that you were all right, Draco began. That's kind of you. I wanted to talk to you as well. I feel I should apologize. He looked up, surprise upon his face. Apologize? Yes, I'm not sure if you realized it, but I was rather avoiding you for most of this year. I'd noticed. Why? Now that she'd brought it up, Draco was wildly curious. He thought they had been friends, and to be honest, there were occasions when their eyes met that his heart seemed to suddenly race. His palms grew sweaty. He couldn't quite define it, but the sensation was thrilling. He enjoyed spending time with her. Well, if you must know, I became better friends with Harry Potter this year. Yes, and? For some reason, the fact that she'd brought him up set Draco's teeth on edge. He wasn't sure what to make of that, but it felt oddly like jealousy, which made no sense. He had no reason to be jealous of Harry Potter. Well, Harry sort of had this theory. He thought you were the heir of Slytherin. She smiled slightly as she said it, and Draco found himself smiling back despite his angry disbelief. You're joking. And this whole time, I thought he was the heir of Slytherin. You did? The gleeful smile on her face was worth that confession, he thought. Yes, Granger. Despite what you might think, being a Parseltongue and facing down the Dark Lord generally cast one in a suspicious light in the wizarding world. Her eyebrows raised. Granger, am I now? He smiled. Sorry. You haven't been around as much this year, and a lot of the older Slytherins call you Granger. I suppose I got into the habit as well. I apologize, Hermione. It's all right. It makes me sound edgy. I kind of like it. Granger. It rhymes with danger, you know. And Danger is my middle name. Really? That seems odd. Why did your parents choose that? How unusual to advertise directly that your child might be a menace to society, he thought. I'm only joking, Malfoy. She laughed as his eyes widened at her use of his surname. What? Turn around is fair play. If I'm Granger, you should be Malfoy. He smiled again. I suppose you're right. And I appreciate your apology. And I'm sorry for assuming the worst of Potter. Well, you know what they say when you assume. You make an ass out of you and me. Well spoken, Draco said solemnly. I actually have something else to discuss with you. My father, he's on the board of governors for Hogwarts. He is concerned that word of the Chamber of Secrets will tarnish the reputation of the school. Hermione laughed. I imagine he is. Having a bloodthirsty, murderous basilisk living below a school with hundreds of children can't be good public relations. No, it isn't, Draco agreed. And to that end, my father was hoping, he wanted me to ask if you wouldn't mind perhaps keeping this whole chamber business, the petrification, quiet. From your parents, I mean. Draco was rather uncomfortable now. Asking her to keep such a huge secret from her family was likely too much. She laughed again, longer this time. Oh, Draco, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that I am telling my parents about any of this. His mouth hung open, only for a moment before he asked, Really? Why? She gathered herself before answering. If Mum or Dad find out about that snake, or about the fact that I spent weeks frozen in some weird suspended animation in the infirmary, they will never let me go back to that school. She looked at him firmly, taking in his disbelieving stare. Believe me, Draco, my parents jumped through all kinds of hoops to adopt me. There is no chance that they would let me go there if they knew how truly dangerous Hogwarts is. Chapter 6. Serious Suspicions. A Saturday in August, 1993. Well, behind him. With a flourish, he dropped a copy of the Daily Prophet in the centre of the table, narrowly missing the platter of fried eggs and bacon. Draco yanked the platter back quickly. He was planning to have seconds.
"What's happening?"
Narcissa asked anxiously.
"He's assembling his army,"
Lucius said loudly. Draco froze. Were they talking about Voldemort?
"Who exactly is assembling an army today?"
Narcissa asked mildly.
"Richard, of course!"
Lucius began pacing the room, sweeping open the curtains, running a finger along the top of the mantle, nervous and jittery.
"Not this again,"
Narcissa muttered under her breath. Draco scooped up the newspaper. Sirius Black? Mother, isn't this your cousin? He turned the newspaper to show her. She took it, shock clouding her eyes.
"Yes, he's been in Azkaban for nearly your entire life. What's happened?"
She scanned the article, clutching at the neck of her mourning robes. Lucius turned to face them, wild-eyed.
"What's happened is that maniac has escaped. He was in league as a secret agent with the Dark Lord many years ago, and now he is meeting back up with his handler. I imagine that Granger was in charge of him all those years ago, because I never saw Sirius at any meetings that I attended, just like I never saw Granger."
"But can 2 men really be classified as an army?" Draco asked reasonably, then shrank from his father's crazed gaze.
"It won't only be 2 men by the time they're done. As it is, I believe they have another in league with them, who is planning to teach at Hogwarts this very year."
"What do you mean, father?"
"Remus J. Lupin. Despite having a spotty employment history, Dumbledore has hired him as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. I don't know if Dumbledore is being bamboozled, or blackmailed, or both. And Lupin is a bit of a mystery. He was close with Sirius Black many years ago, and I have no doubt that the 2 of them worked for Granger, on behalf of the Dark Lord, to kill Potter and his wife. Now that Black has escaped from prison, and Lupin is at Hogwarts, something is afoot. The 3 of them are planning something, I know it!"
Lucius sat in his chair abruptly, summoning the teapot and sloshing half of it across the table as he caught it. Narcissa pursed her lips, but said nothing.
"I just wish I had answers! If they would let me in on the plan, perhaps I could help."
I'll see what I can find out, father," Draco promised. Later that morning, back in their bedroom, Narcissa brushed out her hair slowly at her vanity, whilst Lucius summoned several shirts, ties, and robes from his wardrobe, arranging them in a state of fitful confusion on the bed. He had had a hard time adjusting to losing his personal elf, Dobby. For all of Dobby's faults, seeing conspiracies where there were none, for example, he had had a good eye for fashion. Without him, Lucius could not be certain which shirt looked best with which tie, or which robe matched which shoes. Plus, Dobby always knew the correct temperature for his bath, and he plucked Lucius's eyebrows just the way he liked them. He really was going to have a hard time replacing that elf.
"I really wish you'd avoid bringing Draco into your conspiracy theories, darling,"
Narcissa began lightly. She clipped back a portion of her hair, and began applying lotion to her face.
"He's young. He's only 13, and he's very impressionable."
He needs to know the dangers facing him. I believe he's getting closer to Granger's daughter, and now that we know the truth about her...
"All we know is that she was adopted. I realize adoption isn't common among wizarding folks, but we don't know that isn't the case with Muggles."
"Narcissa!"
Lucius turned to face her in the mirror, his mismatched shirt and tie clashing horribly.
"What we do know is that this man is raising this child to be a warrior, a mercenary, and now we find out that she isn't even a blood relative of his. Say what you will, but anyone willing to go to the lengths that he is going for a child not even related to him, he means business."
She sighed.
"Please, don't wear that shirt and tie together. You'll look sillier than Cornelius Fudge in his lime green bowler hat."
Lucius frowned irritably.
"Thank you."
Narcissa finished her makeup and slipped on one of her favourite lilac robes. They were preparing to go into Diagon Alley for Draco's school shopping, and she wanted to look her best. She only wished that Lucius could see how silly all of this was. When he had first proposed the idea of the parent of a Muggle-born being a Death Eater, it had seemed laughable but not entirely implausible. After all, the Dark Lord himself had known much about the Muggle world, somehow. Once she met Richard Granger, she felt nearly certain that he was no threat. He reminded her a lot of the brother-in-law that she'd known for only a few years back at Hogwarts, Ted Tonks. A jovial boy, young Ted had been quick to crack a joke, coming up with puns and slapstick on the fly. She had voiced a hint of her doubt with Lucius when he brought it up in Diagon Alley, after he and Draco first met the Grangers, but her husband wasn't willing to listen. Then she met and got to know Linda. Linda was like a missing puzzle piece for Narcissa. Many of the questions that she'd had about Muggles over the years, both large and small, suddenly had answers. What did Muggles use to keep their hair curly without charms? What kept airplanes in the sky? And what exactly was a Tesco? Linda had promised to take Narcissa to one this autumn, and she was looking forward to it. So she allowed this charade to continue. She wasn't proud of it, but she did it anyway. Linda was different from the pure-blood witches she knew. Narcissa enjoyed her friendship with Linda, and she wasn't willing to give it up. And when Narcissa met Hermione, and then got to see how Draco spoke of her when he was home from school, one thing was clear. Narcissa wasn't the only Malfoy that enjoyed spending time with a Granger. Diagon Alley was crowded, as usual, when they arrived. New firsties with their parents, upperclassmen roaming in small groups, parents wrangling children too young for school whilst their older children shopped. The street was lively and boisterous despite the distressing news about the escape of Sirius Black. Draco and his parents found the Grangers peering over an extensive list of potions ingredients in Mr. Molepepper's apothecary. Draco focused hard on not staring at Hermione. He had only seen her up close once since she'd been petrified months before, and she'd avoided being too close to him for months before that. When they talked on the train at the end of school this past June, she'd been wearing robes over her Muggle clothing. Now she was dressed in a Muggle summer dress, in a buttery yellow colour with little flowers all over it. The skirt had a flouncy ruffle that skimmed and fluttered at the tanned expanse of her legs. The top was sleeveless and looked beautiful on her. When she smiled, she looked like a ray of sunshine. No, he was definitely not staring. Lucius shook hands and bowed to Richard, and Richard, who had become accustomed to this, bowed back.
"Ah, Malfoys! Glad you found us. Quite the list of ingredients here, isn't it?"
"Yes. Professor Snape is always very thorough," Lucius agreed. He looked round for his wife, but she and Linda had walked away, looking at the beauty potions and lotions section further into the store. Draco had immediately latched upon to Hermione and was doing his best to fumble through a conversation with her across the room. He looked back at Richard. Lucius wanted more information about Hermione's parentage, but this could be his only chance to get answers about Black and Lupin, which was far more pressing at the moment, considering the news of the day. But before he could speak, Richard asked,
"Hey, how did the potion master calm his wife?"
Lucius looked at the chemist counter, where the potioneer, old Mr. Molepepper, was compounding a medication, whilst his elderly wife wrote down charges in the ledger book. "I confess, I don't know."
"Elixir?"
Richard grinned widely.
"Ah, yes. Elixirs can be quite helpful. Euphoria, calming, all good options. Listen, Granger, tell me, are you working with anyone? Anyone new or old, as the case may be?"
"Well, we did hire a new bookkeeper at the practice, but her conflict skills are rather lacking."
"Conflict skills?"
Lucius drew in a breath. He himself had not practiced dueling for a number of years. If Granger saw the need for battle skills, he might be in trouble.
Yes, when it comes time for collecting for services rendered, she's a bit of a softy. Tends to let some of the patients slide a couple of months. Oh well, I guess if we wanted to run a tight command, we should have hired General Ledger.
Legier was a major player at one time, but I'd heard he'd gone underground. Lucius could not be certain, but he was almost sure that Knott had once told him that Xavier Legier had escaped to France after the last Wizarding War and planned to stay there to avoid prosecution.
Richard smiled knowingly. Major player! Now you're getting it, Lou!
The Muggle man clapped him on the back, and Lucius struggled not to pull away from the man's dark mark, exposed so brazenly here in Diagon Alley. Long-ago Death Eaters, Lucius thought. He only had a few moments before Narcissa grew tired of entertaining Mrs. Granger, and he wanted to discuss more urgent matters.
"I wish to speak to you about Sirius," he said. "Sirius about what?" Richard asked in confusion. "Not what. Who? Well, rather, where? Where is he? Who?" Richard asked. "Sirius." "Seriously?" I'm not certain of his middle name. It could be Lee, I suppose." "Who?" "Black."
Lucius was growing more and more frustrated.
"White." "What? I'm talking about Sirius." "Are you serious?" Richard asked him with a knowing look. "Surely you don't think I'm serious?" Lucius retorted disbelievingly. "To be honest, I'm not serious either," Richard said with a lazy smile, "and don't call me Shirley."
Lucius stared at him for a moment. Richard was smiling, clearly enjoying toying with his prey. The Muggle man's eyes never left his own, and Lucius recognized the challenge within them. Don't call me out. Don't challenge my authority. Richard's look said, "You will live to regret it, but you will only be alive to regret it for a little while." "I understand, Granger. My apologies."
"We are going after this to get a new pet for me for my birthday," Hermione said, browsing the various dried roots in Mr. Mulpepper's. "Would you like to come?"
"I would, but I need new school robes. My old ones are too short," Draco answered regretfully.
"Yes, you've grown quite a bit taller in the last year," Hermione said, then immediately blushed. How embarrassing to point out that she'd noticed that.
But when she glanced at Draco, she saw that he was blushing as well. The thought of this made her shiver a bit, though she didn't know why. "Cold?" he asked.
"A bit. It's nice out in the sunshine, but indoors it's a bit dreary, isn't it?"
Hermione ran her fingers along the backs of her arms briskly in an effort to warm them. "Here." Before he could hardly register what he was doing, Draco was stripping off the ivory-coloured lightweight jumper he'd worn over his Oxford shirt and offering it to her.
"Oh, no, I didn't mean—"
"Nonsense, Granger. You're cold, and I'm not. To be honest, I find it a bit stuffy in here."
"Thank you,"
Hermione said. There was nothing for it. She was certain her cheeks were bright red now. "It's not a problem. Do you know what you plan to get for a pet?" he said in an effort to change the subject.
"I'm not sure. Perhaps an owl, although the school owls work quite well, and I'm afraid if I do get an owl, Mum and Dad might want to keep it. They loved the one that your parents loaned us a few years ago."
"A cat, then?"
"Oh, I would love a cat. I've always wanted to have one, but Mum is allergic."
"I see. And maybe a toad?"
"Ugh, no, thank you. I'm afraid if I get a toad, she might meet up with Neville's toad, Trevor, in the common room, and all of a sudden we would have an infestation. It would be like the 10 plagues of Egypt all over again."
Hermione turned to face him, having selected her herbs and roots in the small shopping basket.
"I'm just not sure. Third years can have a variety of pets, so I'll have to see what strikes my fancy."
He smiled at her. "Just not a locust?"
She smiled back. "Definitely not. Are we eating lunch together at the Leaky?"
"I think so. I look forward to seeing what you selected."
Hermione took a deep breath and tried to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach at his words.
"Is that a weasel, Granger?"
Draco peered with uncertainty into the cage, trying to discern the breed of animal inside. "No,
It's a white ferret. They're very smart and social creatures. I think he would be a lot of fun to have around."
Draco watched the irascible pink nose quiver and tiny pink feet scamper around the cage. He seems a bit twitchy.
"Well," Hermione said, picking up the cage and bringing it to eye level, smiling widely and talking in a baby voice to the creature, "you might be twitchy too, if you had to live in that awful place with those great big things flying around everywhere. Owls and crows and ravens and falcons. You probably never got a moment's rest, did you, Houdini?"
"You named him Houdini?"
"No, I didn't. The woman at the magical menagerie did, I suppose. After the magician, I guess. She did say that he liked to hide sometimes, and she had trouble finding him."
"The famous Houdini was a wizard, Hermione."
"No, he was a—"
she started, then thought for a moment.
"Oh, well, that takes a bit of the mystery out of it, I suppose."
Draco couldn't help but smile at her slightly crestfallen expression.
"Mum and Dad are nearly finished with lunch," Hermione said reluctantly. "We'll be going soon. Here, let me give you your jumper."
She began to take it off, but he stopped her. "It's all right. You hold on to it. You might need it again sometime." It was his cheeks now that coloured pink.
"Thank you, Draco."
She gave him a quick hug, then hurried back to her parents. Yes, he was plenty warm, Draco thought. The start of the school year brought new subjects for the third-year students. Draco was now taking arithmancy, care of magical creatures, divination, and ancient runes, in addition to his subjects from first and second year. The year also brought a new and unexpected quirk, in the form of a ferret named Houdini. It was not unusual for Draco to open his trunk and find the white fur ball curled inside, or to pull back his duvet on his four-poster and spot the pink nose twitching from under his pillow. "Granger, you really need to get a hold of your beast. Somehow he keeps finding his way into my dormitory. I cannot figure out how he's doing it," Draco said in mock anger as he delivered the wayward ferret to her table one day at lunch.
Hermione only laughed. "Well, that explains why he always smells like your cologne," she said, then flushed red in embarrassment.
"Interesting," he thought. "She recognizes my cologne."
"Oh, I just realized how he's probably finding you. It's your jumper," she exclaimed.
"What do you mean?"
"Well, I keep your jumper that you loaned me in Diagon Alley near my bed, hanging on one of the posts, you know."
At these words, Hermione broke off in embarrassment. "Really, Granger?" Draco smirked at her. "Keeping me close in your mind?"
Draco suddenly realized what he was implying, that this witch was thinking of him all the time.
"Oh, Hermione, no, I didn't mean—"
"I need to go to the library," she said, averting her eyes as she hurried away, her face burning. Houdini curled around her neck like a living scarf. They avoided each other for 3 days after this conversation, and then, as if by tacit agreement, pretended that it had never happened. But when one or the other of them happened to glance up and catch the other looking at them, whether it was across the great hall or the classroom, they both replayed bits of this conversation in their minds. Third year was shaping up to be the start of something interesting.
Thank you for listening to The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. If you enjoyed this and would like to listen to more, please subscribe to me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts at Silver and Copper, or search Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.